Hi, this is Scott Wilkinson, host of Home Theater Geeks. In episode 186, I chat with Mark Seaton about speakers, measurements, and his involvement with the DIY community. So stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Home Theater Geeks is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson, recorded December 9th, 2013. Episode 186, Speakers, Measurements, and DIY. This episode of Home Theater Geeks is brought to you by iFixit. You can fix it, and iFixit makes it easy with step-by-step repair guides, high-quality replacement parts, and all the tools you'll need. For $10 off your purchase of $50 or more, go to ifixit.com/twit and enter the code HTG at checkout. And by Tonks Coffee. Tonks offers a bi-weekly subscription. Tonks sources their beans directly from the growers. They're roasted and shipped within 24 hours, giving you the freshest coffee beans in the world. For a free sample, visit tonks.org/HTG. That's tonks.org/HTG. And by Hulu Plus. Hulu Plus lets you binge on thousands of hit shows anytime, anywhere on your TV, PC, smartphone, or tablet. Visit huluplus.com/HTG to start your free 2-week trial. That's huluplus.com/HTG. Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, the Home Theater Geek and Director of Content at avsforum.com. This week's guest geek is Mark Seaton, founder and chief designer at Seaton Sound, a very well-known and well-regarded speaker company. Hey, Mark, welcome to the show.
Very nice to be here.
Thanks so much. Now, those of you who are tuned in live at live.twit.tv or logged into the chat room at irc.twit.tv can post questions for Mark, and I will pass along as many as I can. Now, Mark, I wanted to start with how you started Seaton Sound. That was in 2005, I believe.
Correct. March of 2005. And through college, I got into the DIY audio market for building speakers on my own while in school. That was one of the first things we could actually apply the engineering knowledge to. And even before college, audio was something I had always tinkered in. I worked, or should I say slaved, at a couple of boutique retailers, got to play with and meet people from some high-end brands, and with enough time, it's funny how some of those guys who were just running around the country back then are now running some of those companies.
Yeah.
And through the course of that, met a designer in the Chicago area, went to work for that company, helping them in the pro audio world, and ended up trying to get them into the home theater market. Ended up never getting quite to that point, and I decided to finally go dive in on my own.
And where did you learn speaker design? Just sort of along the way?
It's very much hands-on, trial by fire type of thing, and it's an applied science. It isn't a taught skill. You are given in different courses for schooling, and that I did attend Purdue University for electrical engineering, so that's where the basic circuit knowledge and other mechanics and things come into play, and you learn those. But it is ironic that while I worked as an intern and later after college for a few years in a formal engineering company, I grabbed my books from I used to grab my books from college a lot more figuring out audio problems than I ever did at work.
Yeah, so your sideline kind of became your profession after a little while, huh?
Yeah, and in fact, I worked as there's a old thread I think I sent you a link to before, where back around that time, right after 9/11, our company had just been growing a lot, and we had or our business was the business I was working on high rises and design and engineering for those. So after that, they cut a large part of the company, and I decided to turn the moonlighting into a full-time job, and that's when I went into working for for the other pro audio company, and a few years later dove in full on with my own effort.
Mm-hmm. And now the main, you make subwoofers, you make main speakers. The main speaker is called the Catalyst 12C, I believe, right? Or is that just one of the Catalyst models?
The Catalyst is a family of products that all use the same coaxial driver and are a three-way design using separate woofers. All of the Catalysts are three-way active speakers, meaning there are three separate ice power-based amplifiers inside the speaker, and each of those is controlled by a separate DSP channel. So rather than using inductors and resistors and capacitors, the speaker is designed and fine-tuned with a computer, lots of measurement, and being able to make adjustments in a manner and precision that is hard to do with passive components.
Mm-hmm. So active crossovers between the different drivers, separate amplifiers for each of the drivers, and active DSP, digital circuitry controlling where those crossovers are and which frequencies get directed to which driver, right?
Correct. The origin of the Catalyst came from putting large subwoofers in, like our submersive, into big rooms where we'd put 2 or even 4 submersives into a room. And at that point, we kept finding that the limit of the quality of the bass was, in fact, the speakers. So you can keep turning the bass up, but if the speakers can't keep up, and many speakers, especially 8 years ago, 10 years ago, were designed to be in a living room. They weren't designed to fill a heavily treated 20 by 30 room and multiple rows of seats. And when you now put in big subwoofers, to keep up with those big subwoofers, you need a powerful speaker so that you maintain the balance and don't just have a rumbling mess.
And clearly you've chosen the active route. Why is that? I mean, subwoofers are mostly active, mostly self-powered, and for good reason, because they need a lot of power. But so many speakers are passive and allow the audiophile or the home theater enthusiast to match their own amplifier, whatever it might happen to be. Why did you choose to go the active route?
It is a bit against the grain, and the purpose was to offer something that was not available at the time. It gives us 3 distinct advantages. One of those being, whenever you plug in the speaker, no matter if you buy this huge speaker with big 12-inch woofers, lots of output capacity, and significant capability, you can't plug it into a 60-watt receiver and wonder what's the big deal. And in this case, when you plug the speaker in, you have a full 2,000 watts of power available and instantly have the full capability of that speaker. So it does help us guarantee the capability of what's realized in your room and help us close the circle and know what the interaction between the amplifier and the speaker is.
Mm-hmm.
From there, you then, in the active realm, we can also optimize speakers in different ways where we can choose to use a compression tweeter, a high power, mid-range, and coaxial driver. In fact, I have one that is in that speaker you showed the picture of right here. We'll see if that can, probably not terribly clear, but let's see.
That's all right. Move it more into the camera range and we can take a look.
I'm working on that.
Yeah.
It's counterintuitive.
Yes, it is, but there it is. Very good.
Yes. So
tell us exactly what we're looking at here.
And what we're looking at is the 8-inch woofer that is in the center of all of our Catalyst models. With that, let's see if I can get this. There we go. Working on the delay. With that, what you see is the 8-inch mid-range driver. This dust cap, which, while it looks solid, is actually a fabric. And that fabric acts kind of like a grill cloth over a tweeter, and there is actually a tweeter behind there. And you can see from behind, you can see the terminals and the pieces of that on the back.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, what we benefit here, as I mentioned about optimizing the speakers not just for a living room but for multiple rows of seating, we can, by keeping the tweeter and the mid-range at the same point, when you move around the room, your distance from the tweeter and the mid-range never changes because they're concentric. So it allows us some flexibilities in keeping the sound uniform seat to seat, row to row, which is actually a bigger difficulty in the majority of speakers, and allowing for also the high power that is available that is not typically just expected in the home. At the time when we put out the Catalyst, speakers of that type of capability were kind of a foreign concept that only a few on the fringe were doing and were not a common likeness, not a common thing to see in a home.
Mm.
With that DSP we use, finally, also allows us to tame that Pro compression driver, which takes a little bit of work. It isn't quite as simple as just plugging in a soft dome tweeter and getting pretty sound from it. It takes a little work to rein in the high efficiency and capability of those components.
Mm-hmm. Normally, a compression driver is often used, a compression tweeter is often used at the mouth of a horn. Mm-hmm. Are you doing anything along those lines, or waveguide, maybe using the 8-inch
kind of
mid-range as a waveguide or a horn type of thing?
Correct. The cone itself acts as a waveguide, and so you basically have an 8-inch diameter waveguide on the tweeter, and then inside the diameter of the voice coil, there is a shaped metal funnel of sorts that forms the waveguide down to the throat of the compression driver. So you do have a horn and a compression driver embedded within the 8-inch mid-range.
Mm-hmm. Well, I really appreciate concentric drivers or coincident or coaxial drivers. As you can see right behind me, I have a pair of them in my own home recording studio from Tannoy. But I haven't seen a lot of companies use that technique. Why do you suppose that is?
They don't always measure in a single measurement quite as well as the single driver counterparts. In real listening, they tend to sound very good. And that's not to say the measurements don't matter, but what that really is that it takes more than one measurement to really paint the picture of what the speaker can do. And the whole reason behind going with the concentric drivers is on and off axis response to make that as uniform as we can. And by using a larger 8-inch mid-range, we can cross to the woofers in the speakers all the way down at 250 hertz. And we do the same in both our Catalyst 12C and our Catalyst 8C. The 12C has the two 12-inch woofers with the coax mounted in the center. The 8C is a similar design using 8-inch woofers in a smaller package with half the power, a mere 1,000 watts in the speaker.
A mere 1,000 watts. Well, I wanted to also just mention that I, too, am a fan of powered speakers for exactly the reasons you said, that you can match the amplifier with the drivers, optimize their performance together as a whole, and not be wondering, well, who's going to pair this speaker with what amp and how's it going to react, and what if the impedance is mismatched, or many, many things like that. Why do you suppose there aren't more self-powered speakers in the consumer range? There are certainly plenty of self-powered speakers in the pro audio area, which you have worked in, Genelec, Mackie, quite a few, but not so many in the consumer world. Why do you suppose?
Mostly because receivers are so inexpensive.
Mm.
And in that case, once somebody starts looking at it as spending money on external amplification, then the speakers start making a lot of sense. But most start shopping and they're looking at the price of the speaker and not the speaker plus amplifier. If they already have a receiver, and some of the receivers are rather capable, it's a different approach. A significant portion of my customers do, in fact, start from scratch when they've either sold a bunch of equipment or are making an upgrade where they're moving to, say, an Onkyo or Marantz or Integra preamp with XLR outputs, and it's studio-grade XLR cables right out to the speakers and plug right on in, and you don't need any external amplification.
Yeah, that was another thing I wanted to make sure we discussed a little bit was the fact that you have XLR inputs to these speakers. XLR is a type of connector which uses a type of cable called a balanced cable, which is used more in pro applications really than in consumer applications. But again, you're sort of taking the pro approach here and applying it to the consumer world.
Right, and in fact, at the company I was at before, we had taken some very good-sounding pro audio speakers, and I had put those into a couple of homes of some crazy enthusiasts, actually ones I came across on the AVS forum, and had kind of tamed the beasts in the home theater and found the potential for performance that just wasn't there in most of what was available in the home market. So with that was where, by going to the fully powered speakers, we can offer that type of performance. The whole purpose, the whole design behind the Catalyst and the other products was the intention to offer pro dynamic capability with the refinement expected in a home audio product.
So how would you characterize or summarize the difference between a pro audio speaker and a home audio speaker?
The lines have been very much blurred in the last 10 years. My own products were designed always to be in the home. There's no intention of tossing this around on the road or in a truck. The cabinets are designed with that in mind. There's some aesthetic consideration to things. One of the biggest expectations in the home is that the speaker sound great out of the box and when you plug it in. So it has a good balance to that. In the pro world, many studio monitors may be maybe well dialed in, but when you get into professional sound reinforcement, most of the products, they expect them to need equalization and further dialing in to get them to sound their best. So there is a different approach to when you go grab something off the shelf at a Guitar Center or local equivalent versus something designed for a home. And
right.
The picture
certainly
cycling up there in front is in fact the prototypes that went into Art Sonnenburn's theater. Some may know that theater. If you go to artsonnenburn.com, you can go through all kinds of fun photos. He was one of the very early members to invite many people over to their home and open up his home to different AVS members. We had people come in from many states, and then a few years later, even from across the ocean. We had one gentleman come in from the UK and another from Germany just to spend the weekend playing around, talking and meeting. Attendance was in the 65 to 75 person range.
Wow.
Lots of spouses, too.
And lots of spouses, too. He must have had a pretty big house, or has a pretty big house to accommodate that kind of crowd.
Yeah, there was a good bit of room, and fortunately he's an orthodontist and brought in all of his staff to help keep things moving in the house while he was upstairs. It took 3 cycles through the room to get everybody in and through.
Wow. And this was actually the whole idea of the AVS forum get together, we call them sometimes, or meetup, is sort of where you got a lot of inspiration for starting your company, isn't it?
Correct. It was the motivation, and it pushed the decision to sell direct. It pushed the decision that there were people who wanted this type of product.
Right. Well, let's get back to that in a moment. I would like to take a moment, though, if you'll allow me a minute, to thank one of our sponsors for this episode of Home Theater Geeks, which is iFixit. Now, iFixit is an amazing resource. It's probably best known for their teardowns of devices. They want to really go in and find out how they tick and how to fix them. But it's also an online community with over 10,000 repair guides for everything from your smartphone, your computer, your tablet, your game console, lots of different stuff that you can actually go and repair yourself. Even home appliances and your bicycle, for heaven's sakes. It's like having a free online repair manual for everything you've got. You know, if you've shattered your smartphone, which fortunately I haven't done yet, but, you know, there's always a first time. You want to repair your game console, you need to swap out a battery in your tablet, which isn't always easy to do. iFixit has you covered. They can even hook you up with parts you need to do it, and everything they sell is tested and guaranteed. Now, one of the things that iFixit does, in addition to offering online repair guides and a really serious community of people who will help you save a bunch of money by repairing rather than replacing, they offer this really great toolkit. It's called the ProTech Toolkit, and I have one right here, and there it is online as well. It's got over 70 tools to assist you with just about any mod or modification or malfunction or misfortune that comes your way. Tons of great tools, including the one with my favorite name, the Spudger. I love that name, but it helps you, pry things out of their sockets. One of the most important parts of this kit, though, is the 54-bit driver kit. I'm going to show it to you right here, which comes in this beautiful ballistic nylon type case. It's got Phillips bits for small and large electronics. It's got pentalobe bits for iPhones and Mac laptops. You know, for many years I really wished I had one of those, but I just don't. I didn't until now. Torx and Torx security bits for computers and game consoles, a tri-wing bit for video game consoles, and a triangle bit for McDonald's toys. Man, this thing has everything. A swivel top precision driver and a flex extension for those hard to reach screws. And I've certainly come across my fair share of those. Also, electrostatic discharge safe precision tweezers for delicate manipulations. And also in this thing is a static electricity wrist strap that keeps the static electricity away from the sensitive parts that you're working on. Now, this lightweight, compact, durable tool roll makes it the on-the-go choice for repair professionals and amateurs alike. Even better, it's only $64.95 with a 1-year warranty. Hobbyists and home DIY fixers, and that's what we're talking about today. We're going to be talking about on the show here is some DIY stuff. Will make this kit really essential. You can use it for doorknobs, eyeglasses. I've in fact used it for my eyeglasses. And best of all, there's thousands of iFixit repair guides free on their website that you can use to find out how to put your tools to the best use. Now, the holidays are just around the corner, and the ProTech Toolkit makes a great gift for any geek, hobbyist, or DIYer on your list. With iFixit, you can fix it yourself. So visit ifixit.com/twit for all those free step-by-step guides. iFixit also sells every part and tool you'll need. Plus, if you enter the code HTG at checkout, you'll save $10 off any purchase of $50 or more. That's ifixit.com/twit, And we thank iFixit very much for their support of Home Theater Geeks and the entire TWiT network. So we were talking about get-togethers, AVS get-togethers, and how important those have been for you to start your business. I assume that you also got a lot of feedback from AVSers at both in person and on the forum site about what they're looking for in speakers and what they would like, and that has informed your product development as well, hasn't it?
Absolutely. There's everybody has their opinions, and of course, many give them willingly on the forums and critique of all sorts.
Yes.
But it's been a great exchange. There's a little bit of balance between listening to what people are asking for and determining what problems they're really trying to solve. And that's kind of what I tend to focus on, is listening, not necessarily, well, I need this, or I need a speaker that does this, or I need that, and trying to listen through for what solution are they trying, problem are they trying to solve?
Trying to solve, right. And sometimes they may not be expressing that in a way that's obvious, and so you do need to learn to kind of almost be a mind reader, or read between the lines anyway.
Yes, and it's they don't know all the things I can come up with, or things I have sitting on the shelf, and say, oh well, instead of why don't you just make this product that way? It's, well, we have something else in the works. There's a lot of things that we've listened to and done from the customers. Right behind me, the two big subwoofers you see are actually evolutions of our original submersive. Our submersive subwoofer is a dual opposed subwoofer, which has two 15s, but they are on opposite faces of the subwoofer. And in that sense, they share the same box, and they both move out from the box at the same time, both move in. And because of the frequencies being produced, it doesn't matter which orientation or which side of the box they're on, they radiate as one unit. And by having them dual opposing, it makes the box perfectly inert. You can suspend it up in the air and keep it from moving at all. There's no rocking forces back and forth.
Right.
You've probably seen some popular subwoofers, especially the little 10, 12-inch cubes, will dance across the floor if you play them loud enough on a slippery floor. The submersive won't do that at all. Over the years, though, we found there are limitations to that design, even though it has benefits. And we then created the Submersive F2, which is the front firing version. And that's what's actually behind me. That you can see the top half of the bottom of the lower woofer and the full upper woofer. And so instead of being on the sides, the two woofers are on the face of the box and in a little more aesthetically pleasing package, and also one that fits inside of built when people do baffle walls, where everything is flush and there's cavities that things poke through, or if something's even in a large cabinet or hidden in a closet or something of that sort, where we need to minimize what's poking through the wall.
Well, now I've got a couple questions that arise from what you just said. One is, I've always been of the understanding, that it's not really a good idea to put speakers in cabinets, because they're already in a cabinet. They're designed to radiate in a certain way out in free space. And if you're going to put a speaker inside a cabinet, that's going to change the tonal characteristics pretty dramatically, isn't it?
It depends on how you do it. There are some tricks to minimize that, even for main speakers. In the context of subwoofers, first off, let's remember that even the F2, when set on its side, is 20 inches wide by, or 20 inches tall by almost 36 inches wide. So you have to have a sizable cabinet to do that in. So we're not putting this in a little tiny plasma stand. So in that sense, when a custom cabinet is built and a cavity is left with the right openings, it can be done. Generally, you have to watch out for what gets energized or where, what will vibrate when it gets put into when the energy is emanating from the sub, and how much what will shake. When it comes to the main speakers, the biggest error usually comes from the space around the speaker, and then also how far set back the speaker is. It can go in a cabinet. Yes, it can often have some detriments. If it is necessary, the best way to do it is have it as close to the front edge so that there's not major protrusions around it, and also stuff all of the areas with like foam or other foam rubber products and stuff the area around the speaker so nothing can wrap behind it and bounce back out. That big open cavity is what sings back at you, not so much just the walls of it, but even more so that big open cavity.
I gotcha. Okay. Now, are your subwoofers ported or sealed?
All of our subwoofers thus far are sealed. And
why have you chosen that approach?
There's a bunch of benefits. The biggest one that came from many of these realizations from when I was working with a past company and trying to make some big products work in real home theaters was the acknowledgement of what is commonly referred to as room gain. And it's the same effect that allows a small 8-inch sealed subwoofer in a car to extend down to 10 to 20 hertz in this tiny little box. And if you took that car subwoofer and brought it outside, that same woofer without touching anything outdoors would fall off in the 50 to 60 hertz range. And that small size of the cabin is what creates the lift to the bottom end, and that's the physics of the confined volume and dimensions of the room. When you of the space
of the enclosure, right?
So now, because you have a subwoofer inside another enclosure, if you scale that out now to the dimensions of a room, now we suddenly push that corner, instead of being 50 to 80 hertz, 50, 60 hertz, now that is down in the 12 to 24 hertz range. And we can design for that. And when you do design for that, you can take advantage of a lot of gain at the bottom end of the room, and with enough devices, you can get all the level you want. It just comes down, it's easy to get the response flat down low with a well-designed sealed sub. You then just need to have enough horsepower to get the levels you're after in room.
And then there's, of course, the placement of the sub in the room, which makes a huge difference in the overall performance, rather, I should say.
Absolutely. And that kind of dovetails into some of the even DIY and other efforts, is that the biggest advancement in the last, especially probably 3 to 4 years, is the availability and access to acoustic measurements. We became much more familiar with the measurements in seeing what Odyssey and other similar room correction systems like Odyssey Arc, Anthem's Arc, and other products like that, and we would see graphs of what they're trying to do to the response. The biggest failing of most of those, Arc, to their credit, did add a feature to do this later, was that they don't do anything to tell you if you have the subwoofer in the best place. And actually, they just showed the mini DSP microphone that is a USB powered microphone, plugs right into your computer out the back of the microphone body. The whole preamp is actually in that fat end of the microphone. And with that, there are freeware, shareware programs, the most popular being Room EQ Wizard. And with that, people can start taking measurements. That microphone is well under $100 delivered. I think it's about $80 or so dollars. And
where do you get it?
That one actually is purchased direct from Mini DSP at minidsp.com. That is their UMMK1 microphone. And a similar device is also available. A competing device is available at Parts Express, where they sell their microphone, which is a little smaller diameter microphone. The benefits of that smaller diameter are mostly at high frequencies, not at low. But another microphone that is, I believe, $60 plus minus some, and they sell either the microphone to use with free software like RoomIQ Wizard, and then they also have a prepackaged system called the Dayton OmniMic, which is a turnkey system, plug in, start measuring. And while that is that's a few $100s more at about a little over $300 for the setup, but for $300 you have a bit of, if you have the interest, it gives you a level of insight and ability to pick brains of others on the forums and guys like myself to help in optimizing your system that you just can only guess at without a microphone.
Well, that it opens up a whole area of discussion that I want to get into with you. So if you'll stand by for just a second, I'd like to take a moment to thank our second sponsor for this show, which is Tonks. Now, I don't know about you, Mark. Are you a coffee drinker?
You mean the one I just took the sip of?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Well, there are so many coffee drinkers among our listeners and viewers that we really want to make sure that they know about this service called Tonks, Tonx, which is a small company made up of a bunch of very passionate coffee connoisseurs, experts who believe that everyone should have a great cup of coffee and that they shouldn't have to go out to the cafe to get it. They can brew it right in their kitchen. But the key is having the freshest, best quality beans that have been roasted very recently. And so what Tonks does is it offers you a subscription service. Every 2 weeks, they will deliver you a package of roasted coffee beans that have been roasted within 24 hours of their delivery to your home. And with that and your grinder and all of the various tools used to make a great cup of coffee, you can do it at home for a heck of a lot less than you're spending at that cafe. Tonks sources their beans directly from the growers, roasts them, and as I said, ships them within 24 hours of roasting for the freshest beans you can find. They believe that home-brewed coffee can be just as good as your favorite cafe, and it's not as hard as the baristas make you think. This is a very important point to make and kind of a little bit of a secret, but it's really not that hard. But it has to start with those fresh beans, which you can't get if you buy them in the grocery store, and pre-ground coffee is even worse. Man, that's gonna taste like nothing compared to these really fresh beans you're going to get from Tonks, very conveniently, bi-weekly, directly to your door. And they also offer great help, lots of help in the best brewing techniques and equipment. So, this makes a fantastic gift. Once again, here we are at the holiday season. And for those coffee drinkers in your life, and most of us are, I'm sure they would love to see a Tonks subscription under the tree or in the stocking, or we've passed Thanksgiving already. But hopefully some of you received or gave a Tonks subscription to people for that holiday as well. So why not give them a great cup of coffee every morning? They'll thank you every morning. Now, Tonks cares about the experience of their customers, and they're available to help with any questions that you might have and lots of tips and advice. If you fancy yourself a coffee connoisseur, and who among us doesn't, or you just love coffee, you need to try Tonks coffee. These guys are fanatical about delivering the freshest beans, the best beans in the world. They source directly from the growers, as I said, roast it and ship it within 24 hours, so it's as fresh as can be. Every 2 weeks, you get a new batch of incredible beans roasted to perfection. Tonks is subscription only, and they're offering a free sample to our listeners. So what do you have to lose? Check it out at tonks.org/HTG to get some for yourself, or send it to someone you know who really appreciates the finer things in life. That's tonks.org/HTG. And we thank Tonks very much for their support of Home Theater Geeks and the entire TWIT network.
I'll
So,
be sure
Mark,
to take advantage of that.
I'm sorry?
I plan to take advantage of that.
Hey, great, fantastic. Let me know what you think. You know, it's a great service. I got to tell you, it's really wonderful to get that right at your door right away. I will be very interested to hear what you think.
Might be a reason to come back on.
Now, we were talking about measurements, and measurements are a really sticky wicket. You know,
they are.
As there's so many different ways to do it, and consumers, particularly, if they were to go and buy one of these microphones and the software that you mentioned and set it all up, first of all, how can they learn how to get meaningful measurements? And what the heck are meaningful measurements anyway? I mean, you could take a bunch of measurements and it wouldn't tell you anything, but you might think it was telling you something, but it wouldn't. Now, this is a big can of worms, so help us sort through it, would you? Sure.
It's not a simple topic, but the starting point is simple. The part of it is the expectations. The expectations should be to learn about your system and to get measurements, be able to, once you can take a few measurements that make some sense. When you turn the subwoofer off, then the bass goes away, and when you turn it up, it gets louder, and when you turn it down, it gets quieter. You know, watch to see what happens and make sure things actually make sense. The most important thing in a measurement is to know that it is what it does and does not tell you.
Right.
And in that, you know, for the subwoofer range is probably the easiest one that everyone should start getting into. And that's where measurements tell you the most, are the most useful, and you can actually affect them directly. When you get into the high frequencies, that's where simple EQ is not a simple matter. And it generally comes to physical changes or subtle changes that are not as easy to identify. So in the simple terms of the subwoofer end of things, what you're really looking for is to look at what the subwoofer does before Odyssey or any other toys in the system adjust things. So you want to know what you're starting with. And in order to do, you know, turn off the speakers, unplug the wires, turn off the amplifiers if they're separate, either way, if you're having trouble seeing that things are actually going where they're supposed to, the biggest effort can be to actually just plug right into your subwoofer. The one cautionary bit that I give to anybody looking to buy just the microphone, like the UMMK or the comparable microphone from Parts Express, is that Room EQ Wizard. You can sometimes get very lucky, but you do have to have a little patience with software and fumbling through to find some menus and things like that. There are some very good tutorials that are out on different forums, and lots of users are very familiar. And there are many different there are many different avenues to get input. One of the things that my customers get when they purchase from me is obviously access to my input on that, and likewise on my own small user forum, which doesn't get a ton of traffic but is fairly focused. Most of my customers have already asked me questions about what people are encountering, and they actually jump in with similar answers to what I would offer before I even see it.
So what you're saying is basically disable everything first and measure the frequency response of the subwoofer in your room.
Right.
But won't that result yield many different results depending on where you put the microphone even?
Yes. As far as placement of the microphone, the best results always come if you can get a separate microphone stand. They look like these big bulky items, but if you actually look at the stores, they're very inexpensive. You can get a microphone stand anywhere from $20 to $60, and you want one with what they call a boom, so that you have the vertical part and the arm going 90 degrees out. And with that, you then have the ability. The reason that's key is to be able to get the microphone microphone out over your seat and not having the stand on the seat. And the reason for that is, you sit in a leather chair. There you can see the microphone stand, and the boom. The boom is the part highlighted right there, and that allows you to extend it out over objects. And with that, you isolate the microphone from vibrations of the seats. And if you've got some big capable subwoofers, your seats will, especially the leather seats, do vibrate a bit, and
that will get imparted into the microphone and change the results, huh?
Absolutely. This also comes into play even if you're just running Odyssey. One of the biggest tweaks of getting better results with Odyssey is to use either a clip or painter's tape and affix the puck microphone that your receiver comes with and put that on the end of the boom so that you now have many possible microphone locations instead of just sitting on the top of the seat chair, which, of course, is never exactly at your ear height.
Right. Now, we saw a couple pictures there of a microphone being very close to the subwoofer. Is there any good reason to do that for consumers? I imagine there is a good reason for you as a manufacturer to do that.
Correct. There can be reasons, and there are times you want to understand what your subwoofer is doing. DIYers definitely want to spend some time with those types of measurements to look at what the subwoofer itself is doing in isolation. And what you're doing there is by keeping about a finger's width or a little more between the microphone and the speaker. The only issue is you have to watch out to not turn it up too loud, otherwise you send your microphone flying, or put a hole in your woofer, both of which I've done, and in years of experience. And
yes.
With that, what you're doing is by getting very close to the subwoofer, that becomes the dominant sound, and any reflections from the room are dramatically minimized. The best results to do that are out in the middle of a room or in a large space or even outdoors, but generally a large room gives you pretty accurate results, not necessarily something you're looking to put in a lab type measurement, but plenty to tell you what you need to know about getting it to work in your room. From there, most enthusiasts want to be measuring out at their listening position, roughly at ear height. So sit down and have somebody else or take a tape measure and see how high your ears are in your chair. They can vary quite a bit. They can vary a good 8 inches depending on the chair and the person.
Right. SoCal Ray Jr. in the chat room is saying this is called near field measurement when you put the microphone right up against right near it, that's exactly right.
Correct. And as a minor note, that works best and is most useful, only tells you the complete picture of the subwoofer when you're dealing with a sealed subwoofer. When you get into ported subwoofers, you will actually see the absence of where the port is operating because you're close to the woofer, not the port. So it's useful in other manners, but it doesn't give you the complete picture of how the subwoofer operates.
Right. Do you use anechoic chambers for any of your measurements? I know quite a few speaker companies do. I tend to use Mother Nature's anechoic chamber more than official ones. Which means you take your speakers outdoors?
Exactly. And then creative use of measurements as far as using boundaries and things of that sort for the DIYers out there wanting to understand how you can actually see what some of the speakers are doing and are always scratching their head of how they get the dips and the other things. That picture there is actually a significant great outdoors project. We'll
talk about that in a minute.
Get to later, but yes, as far as getting outdoors, that location actually is where Keith Yates did the original Way Down Deep measurements for then
Home Theater Magazine.
Home Theater Magazine,
or it might have been AVI, even Audio Video Interiors. I remember
the Ultimate AV was short-lived there for a while.
Yeah,
I think it was.
In fact, I was the one who edited those articles.
Really?
Small
world.
It is a small world.
And you may the version for the other end, the company I used to work for was actually part of that process. The contra-bass subwoofer was in
Yeah,
there.
I know that he does all of his subwoofer measurements outdoors,
Correct.
as you call it, the nature's anechoic chamber, which isn't 100% true. I always thought, because you actually have the ground, so you've got some reflection coming off the ground at least. But if you put the microphone
and
up
the question is, do you
close,
actually
then you're probably minimizing that effect.
Right, and it's not even minimizing. You're actually with most boundaries and measurements, you either want to be really close to them or really far. And when you get really close to the boundary, when you're within a small fraction of a wavelength and below 100 hertz, we're talking many feet,
Right.
not inches, but many feet. And
Right.
really placing a microphone on the ground can be effective all the way up to, on a small microphone, 5 kilohertz. So, at that point, you can aim a speaker, 2 meters away from the speaker, and angle it down to the microphone, and actually get a very representative measurement below 5 kilohertz, move the microphone up in the air and the speaker on a stand, and measure from 1 kilohertz up. And between the two, you have a very good picture of what a real speaker does.
This brings up the question that I've been meaning to ask, and glad I have a chance to do so. And that is about the correlation between objective measurements and subjective experience. I've asked this question on AVS Forum, and I've gotten lots of lively debate, as you can imagine. But I wonder what your take is on it.
Well,
is there a correlation? Is it strong? Is it weak? Does it depend?
There is a strong correlation. It's a key part of designing a speaker. It is a tough way to completely quantify a speaker. So, in simple terms, using our technical difficulties from earlier, when you have only a couple measurements or only a couple of pixels cramming through our video chat, you're only going to see a few blocks and you get a very blurry picture. As you start getting many, many measurements to encompass many, many situations and conditions, you quickly get a much clearer picture and see all of those things. The biggest problem is that we can only measure what we decide to test, and going to any classic, high school, college lab experiment, there was always that point in the lab experiment where you had to enter all of your observations. And those observations are key for any data that later doesn't make sense. And many times, a lot of the enthusiasts forget about that part, that to look for the observations, what was going on when this measurement was taken, because the one measurement is just a snapshot. So the more info you get, the more data you collect, the better picture you get of what a speaker or subwoofer can do. Generally, how a speaker behaves, for a loudspeaker, how a speaker behaves directly in front of it and how it radiates sound into the rest of the room is a huge part of what it sounds like. The other part is how it might change with level, whether it's distortion, frequency response, limited output, and all kinds of other things. And then with subwoofers, you have much of the same. The subwoofers, for the most part, are not subject to the on-off axis aspects, but sometimes those aspects do come into play when you're trying to measure a subwoofer, especially when you get into these monstrous subwoofers that have multiple drivers or 4 feet or more in dimension.
Now, we've been looking at a few, while you've been talking, we've been looking at a few different types of graphs of things,
Sure.
which just goes to illustrate, how many different ways there are to measure and evaluate the performance of a speaker. And, I think your point is very well taken, that if you do a bunch of different kinds of measurements, you get a more complete picture, and you probably can derive a stronger correlation between those measurements and what someone might experience hearing the speaker or the subwoofer than if you do fewer of them or just limit yourself to 1 or 2 or something like that. Here's another one
Right.
that shows you. So I think looking at all these different types of measurements and graphs that come from them just illustrates your point that you want to do as many different types of measurements as you can in order to get that more complete picture.
Yeah, and a follow-up to closing that would, as far as what you just stated, is probably that measurements can confirm a thorough design, and they can confirm good operation. Someone does have to ultimately plug it in and listen to it to know for sure.
Right. Well, in the last part of the show here, I'd like to ask you about things that DIYers might need to know, some tips and tricks. But before we do, I have one more sponsor to thank for this episode, which is Hulu Plus. Now, most of you probably know Hulu.com is where you can get tons of movies and TV on your computer. But what if you want to take that on the go? What if you want to watch that in your home theater, on your tablet, on your smartphone as you're commuting to work or whatever? Then you really need Hulu Plus. And Hulu Plus gives you access to thousands of movies and TV shows on your mobile device. There's a guy on an elevator watching his TV shows. Hulu Plus is so much more than Hulu.com. You can watch your favorite shows anytime, anywhere. Maybe your favorite show is Jimmy Kimmel Live, certainly one of my faves. Shark Tank, Family Guy, Saturday Night Live. I also use Hulu Plus to check up on Saturday Night Live. And some classic shows, too, like Lost, Doctor Who, which is now in its 50th anniversary hoop-de-doo. Star Trek, which, of course, I binge on that because I'm a serious Trekker, but that's just me. You can also check out exclusive content, which Hulu offers, including The Wrong Mans and Behind the Mask, which I've also been enjoying. It's a story of sports mascots and, those big fuzzy characters out on the basketball field, the football field, and basketball court, I should say. It shows you how much I know about sports, but I'm starting to learn more about those mascots and how cool it is to learn about them. Not that I'd want to be that, but I'm happy to watch about them in the comfort of my home theater. You also get access to a great collection of ad-free movies and kids content, all this for only $7.99 a month. You can catch up on current shows, watch old favorites, catch a great movie, stream as many TV shows and movies as you want for that one low subscription rate. Right now, you can try Hulu Plus free for 2 weeks when you go to huluplus.com/HTG. Now, that's a special offer for our listeners, so I want you to go to huluplus.com/HTG so you get that extra free week of trial, and they know that we sent you. So we thank Hulu Plus very much for their support of Home Theater Geeks and the entire TWiT network. So, okay, DIY tips and tricks. Give us a few. I know several people who really enjoy building their own speakers. Now, this seems like a daunting task to me, but there are plenty of people, certainly on AVS Forum, who really enjoy the challenge. So what can you tell those people who want to try to build their own speaker? What should they think about to avoid problems or get the best results? Give us some tips and tricks.
Yeah, the biggest bit is to start by looking for designs that others have already done. Unless you're coming in this to learn how to design speakers and that's your dream, the first thing is to see what has been done and what's been looked at. With the availability of measurement gear, there are many more documented projects out on the internet. There's even some user groups. The AVS Forum DIY section is very active with lots of projects. I often will comment in there where I can. I find that the DIY section, the guys are experimenting with things and a little bit ahead of what the main enthusiast market are willing to experiment with, and often point them in the direction of things like that. For the most part, the biggest thing is to get a microphone and start measuring. Having the microphone, doing some the biggest thing, the most common starting point is to build a subwoofer. The subwoofers are building a subwoofer has the most tolerance to errors, we should say.
Mm-hmm.
There are sealed subwoofers out there now that are very useful, and basically you're left to just provide power. Build a box and provide power, or some even sell kits to assemble flat panels that are already cut for you. So there's many options out there. The biggest thing is once you get that driver in a box, you pick what you're doing to measure what the result is and spend some time getting it to work in a room. In fact, that driver there is from one of my good suppliers and friends, that subwoofer from Acoustic Elegance, who does some of our drivers, the custom drivers in our Catalyst and other products. But the biggest advantage a DIYer has is to not be restricted by size and weight. So for a subwoofer, if you're trying to keep it really small, you're not there mostly to get the ultimate value. You're there to build something to fit a space that you might not be able to otherwise fit inside.
Mm-hmm.
Once when you get into the larger subwoofers, especially big 18-inch woofers and such, the options, you get a lot of output for your time in. And those big boxes cost money to build. You're not charging anywhere near what I have to pay someone, or I have to pay myself to assemble or work on a speaker. And with that, there is a lot of advantage in efficiency when you go to the bigger boxes, bigger sizes. There's some projects there scrolling in front that I recognize, and some amusing ones there. And there are many different types. If someone's starting out, I'd recommend going with a sealed subwoofer. Starting out, getting comfortable with how that all works, getting it working. Learn how all of the Teal small parameters work. Those are parameters and quantities that tell us how a subwoofer behaves in a given size box, how loud it is, how much power it takes to get to a certain level, what the response will be before you build it. Mm-hmm. And even with very simple freeware programs, you can get quite accurate within the limits of the data you have on the driver. There are then levels of refinement for those models much higher, but you'll just jumping on most of the forums, whether it's AVS or even the DIY audio forum and a few others, you'll quickly find info on how to predict what you're going to see. And now we've got many guys documenting the results of what they have built. So most common, there's a few products out there, 15, 18-inch drivers that go into big, 3 and 4 cubic foot subwoofers. You add power, whether it's, if you can tolerate or can put in another room, you can use some very inexpensive pro audio amplifiers. In general, those amplifiers work quite well for subwoofer duty. The biggest caution is generally to not overdrive them. They sound great until they clip. If you notice, most home audio amplifiers don't have clip lights on them, and that's because they don't want you to know when they are clipping. In the pro world, you see when they are clipping, and the idea in there is to keep it well under those clip limits. So generally, you want a little more power than you would think you want, and the ratings are a little generous for the power wars of who's got the biggest amplifier.
Right. Would you say that it would be, if someone was really starting out just at the very beginning of this hobby, to start with a kit, or?
Yeah, and there's a few kits out there, whether it's a complete kit or a plan. There's actually even I'll give a plug to the guys from the AVS DIY group. There's a DIY sound group. I believe it's DIYsoundgroup.com or similar, that has a plethora of kits and different things they put together, fully crowdsourced from people on both the AVS forum and many other forums where there are flat kits to do. If you want a complete cabinet that you can screw a driver into, Parts Express, and I think even Metasound and a few others may have that. But you can see there, if you want to assemble some stuff, there are many options there that have been designed by other enthusiasts and things that are available. And you can put those things together yourself. The biggest thing is to check your work. So just because you have a plan and have the parts and put them together, don't assume that they went together correctly. Take that microphone and figure out what went wrong. I mean, when I go out to home theaters, in the rare cases when I actually go and dial in my products out there, or my subwoofers in a system, or fix a problem, generally we're chasing down wiring issues, finding if signals are going the right way. When it comes to DIY speakers, was the crossover wired right? Are the polarities correct? And you think you double checked it, but that's why even in our shop we have set processes of how to build everything, but everything gets tested with a microphone before it goes out the door. And that's a critical part to ensuring everything is really doing what you expect it to do.
Mm-hmm. Do you also do subjective listening before it goes out the door?
We do tests that will indicate if there's problems. So there are parts that check for ticks, leaks, squeaks or rubs or anything like that, and to make sure there's nothing unexpected. I took time early on to intentionally miswire and do all those sorts of things to speakers that could happen during the process, and have that documented so we know what that looks like on a measurement.
That's cool.
A measurement might not always tell you exactly what is wrong unless you know what you're looking for, but it will indicate that something is wrong. And then it's up to you to look further or measure for more, to find it.
Great. Well, listen, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. And thanks a lot for all the great information.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Good deal. Good deal. That's Mark Seaton of Seaton Sound. SEATON sound.net is his website, which is, as I understand, under construction at the moment.
Major construction. Data info will be going up on that this week and next week with lots of good things. Generally, we've grown through our own forum and all of the other forums by word of mouth. And, even in spite of the current status of the website, have customers out in about 25 different countries.
Yeah. Well, certainly the AVS forum members hold Seaton speakers in high regard. So I'm sure they are happy to hear you speak about it, and I certainly am too. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Of course, you can find me at avsforum.com. You can email me at scott@twit.tv. And you can follow me on Twitter at htgeekscott, also at avsforum. And you can find previous episodes of Home Theater Geeks right here on twit.tv/htg and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/twit Home Theater Geeks. Next week, my guest geek is scheduled to be Thomas Larson, a projectionist at the famous, what's now called the TCL Chinese Theater in Hollywood, California. Used to be the Grauman's Chinese, then the Mann's Chinese. Now a Chinese company called TCL has bought the naming rights for that theater, so it's now known as the TCL Chinese Theater. But Thomas is a projectionist there. It's now an IMAX theater. And in fact, they have both IMAX and non-IMAX projectors, digital projectors in that theater. So we're going to be talking about digital cinema in particular, and IMAX and other things from the projectionist point of view. You might have thought the projectionist was a lost art, a dying job, and it may be in some cases, and I'm going to ask him about that, but he should have some very interesting insights into that whole world. So I do hope you will join me. Until then, geek out.